The bloodiest fighting of April 19th, the Battle of Menotomy in the Jason Russell House. On April 19th, 1775, the British marched on Lexington and conquered. By mid-afternoon, the exhausted redcoats were retreating toward Boston, under heavy fire from the colonial militia. The running battle reached its peak in the village of Menotomy, today known as Arlington. This stretch of road saw the bloodiest fighting of the entire day. Around 4 p.m., Lord Percy's column of nearly 2,000 British soldiers entered Menotomy. Militia companies from more than a dozen towns had taken positions behind stone walls, in orchards, inside homes, along the route. The British responded by deploying strong flanking parties through the fields and woods. These moves trapped many militiamen between the main column and the flankers. At the Jason Russell House, a group of militiamen from Danvers, Beverly, Lynn, Salem, Dedham, Needham, and across local areas gathered to make a stand. Jason Russell, a 59-year-old farmer with a lame leg, had sent his wife Elizabeth and children to safety. He stayed behind and joined the fight. The men built makeshift barricades of shingles in the orchard and prepared to fire on the British column. British flankers suddenly attacked from behind the house. Caught by surprise, the militiamen rushed towards their only shelter, the house itself. Jason Russell, slowed by his lame leg, was shot twice on his own doorstep and bayoneted repeatedly. Some reports say up to over a dozen times. Inside the house, some of the most brutal fighting from the entire battle took place. The militiamen fired from the windows and the cellars, from the upstairs. When the smoke cleared, 12 Americans lay dead in and around the house, including Jason Russell. 2 British soldiers were killed. Bullet holes from the fighting remain visible in the walls and doors and stairways to this day. Across Menotomy, the casualties were heavy. About 25 colonial militiamen and roughly 40 British soldiers were killed in this single stretch of the retreat, more than at Lexington and Concord. Elizabeth Russell returned that evening to find her husband and the other fallen men inside her home. The house had become a scene of intense hand-to-hand combat during one of the earliest and fiercest engagements of the Revolutionary War. It showed that ordinary farmers and townspeople fighting from their own homes and fields could inflict serious damage on professional troops. Menotomy may not be as famous as Lexington or Concord, but its story reveals the true cost and determination behind the fight for independence. Welcome back to the Outpost. I'm Nomad. So, you're probably wondering, hey Nomad, why are we learning about the Battle of Menotomy at the Jason Russell House? Well, I feel that's a good history lesson for everybody to really learn and understand, because I feel like the foundations of our Second Amendment were kind of founded on that day in particular. So that was the day that the famous battles of Lexington and Concord took place. And those are the battles that I think people on a nationwide level tend to remember. And nobody really learns much about the Battle of Menotomy. Now, if you grew up in New England, and particularly in Boston in the later half of the 20th century, then you probably know a bunch about the Battle of Menotomy, as well as Lexington and Concord, because when you are raised in that area, the history is just pretty much taught to everybody at school and just in general, right? It's just our holidays. We had town celebration days that reenactments of the battles would take place at the actual historical house where the battle actually happened. For me, it was just a normal way of life growing up. And I almost, in my own childhood ignorance, kind of thought that like every town across America kind of did something similar around the similar time in celebration of the formation of our country and the sacrifice normal everyday people took to stand against at what at the time was considered to be one of the most powerful and formidable enemies on the planet. And not just the sacrifice that was made, it was the overwhelming odds that these men were against. You're talking not even like a platoon of guys that went up against thousands of British soldiers that were just kind of falling back towards Cambridge to reassess the situation now that they were actually met with like force on force. That's all that day was. It was just the Brits testing us to see if we'd actually throw the first punch. Oh shit. The umbrella fell. So the British were just feeling us out. And the reason why I think the Battle of Menotomy stands out among the others is because the Battle of Menotomy, it really was just militiamen and just normal citizens, farmers, people that had had enough, had been pushed too far, and did something about it. So what stands out for me is the fact that in Menotomy, which is now Arlington, you can go to the Jason Russell House, you can see the bullet holes, you can see the bloody steps, you can go and see that history for yourself if you want. Unfortunately, Arlington in Massachusetts is a shell of its former self, but this is why we need to remember these types of events, the sacrifices that people made to ensure that we would have the amendments that keep us free from overreaching government rule, like the Second Amendment. Now, I know everybody knows the Second Amendment, obviously, because most of the people here are all somewhat into guns or something of that nature in some degree or shape or form. But I think a lot of people don't truly understand the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is in 4 parts. A well-regulated militia is part number 1. Okay? Now, what is a well-regulated militia? A well-regulated militia is all of us. It is up to us to be the well-regulated militia, because it comes down to every person that lives in this country. Now, the second part, being necessary to a free state. A well-regulated militia is necessary for a free state because it is up to us, the citizens of this country, to regulate our own government. That is the intention of the Second Amendment. It is up to us to enforce the government to do what is right to secure a free state. Now, part 3, the right of the people to keep and bear arms. Now, this is pretty straightforward. We get to keep and bear whatever arms the government gets to keep. And that is just how they intended that to be. And then the last part is, you know, the one we all know. Shall not be infringed, right? So, shall not be infringed is pretty cut and dry. Shall not be infringed literally means it's a right that the government can never take away from us. And yet, it's a right they're constantly trying to strip from us. Trying to limit it, they're trying to add regulations, limitations, every day. The stranglehold that our controlling overlords has on us in our everyday life is getting worse and worse by the day. We have data centers that are literally just buying out local governments, right, at a county and state level, right? And they're forcing these massive data centers into areas that want nothing to do with them. So what did I have? It was 43 1/4 minus 1.5 inches, so 41 3/4 for this side. I mean, look at what happened in Utah. They literally just ignored the entire town who showed up to vote against this and just went with it anyway. So even on a local level, they're taking away our just right to vote against this established system. And I see a lot of people in this space that are kind of just being like, oh, well, we should just, you know, it's happening anyway, so let's just, you know, give in and just, you know, oh, we should just embrace AI and learn how to use it to as a force multiplier. And it's like, this is literally, like, we are literally watching them bolt the arms and the legs on the Terminator. And just sitting here and not doing anything about it. At least if you're trying to break your dependency from the system and do for yourself, you're at least fighting the system passively, right? I'm not overtly going out and playing Escape from Tarkov. You know what I'm saying? But I am still fighting the system by creating my own independence where I don't need it anymore. And the last thing I want to do is go balls deep in some freaking AI technology just to try and fit in with the rest of the NPC herd that's literally being led to their own fucking slaughter and they have no idea. So I've been seeing a lot of this shit kicking around on the internet where we need to just like go along to get along and you know, listen, I understand we all got our lives to live. We got bills to pay. But people need to start making real steps towards independence, or else we will have no amendment to fall back on other than the second. And I think at that point, the people they claim to be, you know, all about their constitutional freedoms and stuff like that are just gonna go, and they're just gonna go and they're gonna friggin' sign right up for the 15-minute city country club and inject their fucking consciousness into the fucking AI mainframe database that fucking Trump and the rest of the friggin' Canaanite elite worshipping fucking pagans are gonna try and get them to do. And anyhow, you guys be safe. It's gonna start getting crazy real soon. I'm Nomad. This is the Outpost. Later, y'all.